What happened on Saltwell Hill is brought to you by Rapid Answers. On the 7th of January 1949, Tommy Vanderveer and his new wife Beatrice were seen walking up Saltwell Hill toward the home that they were living in at the time. This was the last anyone ever saw of Roy, Beatrice, or her 17-year-old daughter Wanda. What happened to the family of three remains a mystery even now, over 70 years later. In this podcast, we will explore the events surrounding this story, the people involved, and what the families, community, and public opinion believes happened on Saltwell Hill. This is Roger Hunter, your host and storyteller, and welcome to episode 5. I've got a lot going on in today's episode, which I've decided to call Everything You Need to Know. But to start out, we're going to go down a little side road for just a few minutes. We're going to go to Keevil, Kentucky, August 12th, 1948. Garrett, I'm going to let you get us started.
Thank you, Roger. The Sikeston Herald, Thursday, August 12th, 1948. Daylight robbery of Kentucky Bank. 3 well-dressed men take all cash at Keevil, Kentucky. 3 well-dressed men entered the Bank of Keevil at Keevil, Kentucky at 11:15 this morning and made away with all the bank's cash, although the exact amount has not yet been determined. When the 3 robbers entered the bank, they ordered the 2 assistant cashiers, John Miller and Mrs. Linda Hook, into the vault, seized all the cash, and made their getaway in a car parked near the bank. They fired several pistol shots into the air as they drove off. At 2 o'clock this afternoon, no trace or identification of the robbers has been learned.
Earlier that morning, a red car with 3 men inside pulled onto a parking lot near 19th and Broadway in Paducah, Kentucky. One of the men walked into the lot at the Brookshire and Trace Used Car Company, while the red car with the other 2 men inside pulled away. The man who walked onto the lot was tall, slender, and had a pitted complexion. He quickly became very interested in a black 1941 Chevrolet, and after thoroughly inspecting it, he asked if he could take it for a test drive. The attendant, Stanley Trace, seeing nothing suspicious, said, "Okay, but only for a short distance." The man drove off in the black Chevrolet, and I'm sure as you suspect, he never returned. About an hour later, Trace contacted the Kentucky State Police and reported the black 1941 Chevrolet as missing. Mrs. Eugene Holder and Mr. Ralph Burns walked into the Keevil Bank around 10:45 a.m. They were engaged in conversation with the 2 cashiers, Linda Hook and John Miller, when the black 1941 Chevrolet pulled up to the curb outside. 2 men jumped out of the car, waving guns, and entered the bank. One of the men ordered everyone into the vault and held the 4 individuals at gunpoint. The other one began collecting all the money he could find. They took $10,000 in bills from the vault and then proceeded to rifle through the cashier drawers, grabbing everything. One of the men told everyone to stay in the vault for 15 minutes or he'd blow their heads off. Outside, the 3rd man was waiting in the black Chevrolet. When a customer exited the post office next door and walked toward the bank, the man in the car showed his gun and instructed him to turn around and go the other way. The 2 men left the bank, taking every penny in sight. The only money left in the bank was $10 in the pocket of one of the cashiers. The 2 men were described as one having a narrow face and weighing around 165 pounds. The second was said to be 6 feet tall, slender, and had a pitted face. As the men sped out of town, they shattered the back window of the car and fired 4 shots, seemingly at random. One of the shots came dangerously close to hitting Devoy Burley, who was standing beside a car outside of his garage. Another shot hit the fender on the car, and a third shot hit the radiator. The 4th shot almost struck Ed Keeling, who had saw the 1941 black Chevrolet approaching and threw his keys at it. The 1941 black Chevrolet was found just outside of town, parked in some shrubbery. The 3 men had escaped in what was assumed to be the red car, taking more than $19,000 in the holdup. 5 days later, 2 men ran a stop sign in Evansville, Indiana, and were chased by a Vanderburgh County sheriff across the state line into Henderson, Kentucky, where they stopped and yielded to police. They were questioned and placed under arrest on suspicion of being involved in the Keyville robbery. The FBI was tight-lipped about the case, but did inform the press that a 3rd man had been arrested in Missouri earlier that day, also in connection to the case. Are you ready to take charge of your future and provide peace of mind for your loved ones? Look no further. Welcome to Rapid Answers Life Insurance, your trusted partner in safeguarding what matters most. At Rapid Answers Life Insurance, we're committed to helping you make the best decisions for your future. We pride ourselves on transparency, simplicity, and unparalleled customer service. With us, you're not just a policyholder, you're part of the Rapid Answers family. Your dreams are worth protecting, and we're here to make it easy. Rapid Answers Life Insurance, your pathway to a secure and worry-free tomorrow. Don't wait another moment to secure your loved one's future. Visit our website at www.rapidanswers.life to get your free, no-obligation quote. Experience the ease of securing your tomorrow with Rapid Answers Life Insurance. Again, that's www.rapidanswers.life. On the morning of February 25th, 1949, officers woke William Messmore and provided him with breakfast. After he finished his meal, they inquired about the important information that he said he had to share with them. Without hesitation, Messmore gave them a 4-page confession. In his confession, he claimed responsibility for the bank robbery that had occurred in Keyville, Kentucky, the previous August. Initially, officers laughed. They thought he was joking because he hadn't even been a suspect in the bank robbery case. However, as he began recounting his version of events, they started to consider that he might be telling the truth. And, after all, for the first time since he had been arrested, he was actually talking. The FBI agents were called back in to question him, and, well, they declined to comment. Messmore indicated that he would not waive extradition to Kentucky, but he remained incarcerated in Corydon, Indiana, and now underwent daily questioning regarding both the bank robbery and the Vanderveers. His story changed almost every time he told it. In some versions of his account, he claimed that Tommy Vanderveer was his accomplice in the robbery, and since bank robbery is a federal crime, the FBI, they came back in again. They wanted to investigate and see if they could find Tommy. They allocated resources. Messmore told them that he and Vanderveer and a third man, whose name he didn't know, had driven his Hudson to Keyville, where they stole the black Chevrolet under the pretense of taking it for a test drive. He then told them how he had entered the bank with a .38 revolver concealed under his coat, and another member of the trio had shattered the window of the stolen car and fired 4 shots as they made their getaway. He wouldn't disclose who fired the shots, only that it wasn't him. Messmore claimed that he had received $4,000 of the stolen cash, despite the fact that his share should have been closer to $6,000. Authorities saw this as a possible motive for him to harm Vanderveer. Messmore told him that he had placed his share of the money in a safe deposit box in Olympia, Washington. In response to this, the FBI seized the safe deposit box, which contained almost $13,000 and some jewelry later identified as belonging to Wanda. Messmore could account for $6,000 of the money as money he made while in prison, selling toys or whatever he did. However, he couldn't explain the other $7,000. But in another puzzling twist, none of the money could be tracked back to the Keyville bank robbery. Now, the Keyville Bank had been robbed in a similar fashion in June of 1947. And many people believe that the second robbery involved the same men as the first robbery. Nowhere in Messmore's story did he mention anything about the first robbery. Some officials began to doubt his involvement in the robbery at all. They suspected that he might be fabricating his confession to be sent back to Kentucky, where he wouldn't have to face questioning regarding the missing Vanderveers. Sheriff Lang and Detective Opal returned to Saltwell Hill and conducted a thorough search around the property and in the many caves and bottomless pits in the area. They discovered that Messmore liked to bury things, random things. They'd locate areas where the ground appeared to have been disturbed, and when they dug, they'd find items intentionally buried, such as a brick or an empty jar or maybe a piece of pipe. Messmore's story was that the Vanderveers had gone into hiding because Tommy was afraid he was going to get caught for the bank robbery. "You'll see," he said. "They'll turn up any day now." On the 26th, Messmore was officially charged in Kentucky for the bank robbery. Indiana was not going to send him back to Kentucky. It was decided that Messmore would remain in jail in Corydon while the investigation into the whereabouts of the Vanderveers continued. In one of the interviews, he mentioned the third person who participated in the bank robbery as Charlie. He said, I don't know what his last name is, but I don't know where he was from. We called him Charlie. On March 6th, Messmore was brought in front of the court, where he pled not guilty to the dog stealing charge, which, by the way, had changed to stealing a dog collar. I guess the dog was in the collar when he stole it. I'm not sure how all that happened, but anyways, he went back to the Corydon jail. And then, on the morning of March 14th, Garrett, why don't you read this one for us?
The Indianapolis Star, Tuesday, March 15th, 1949. Messmore called out from his cell and asked for clean clothing from 2 suitcases taken from him at the time of his recent arrest in Louisville. Sheriff Baxley and Deputy Clee obligingly brought them to him. They opened the cell door and took them inside. Quote, "We figured it was time for him to change," end quote, Deputy Clee said. Quote, "He's had the same clothes on for 3 weeks," end quote. Messamore, chatting disarmingly, picked up the suitcases and set them on his cot in the middle of the cell. He smilingly asked the 2 officials if they wanted to buy his clothes. He said he'd already sold an alarm clock to Prosecutor Eugene Feller at Crawford County. While he was talking, the wily Messamore was edging around on the other side of the cot from Baxley and Clee. Suddenly, before either could lift an arm, he bolted from the cell, slammed the cell door, and locked them in with their own keys, which they had left sticking in the lock. Messamore started down the hallway from the cell, but turned around and came back at the sound of footsteps on the stairs. It was Mrs. Eschol Baxley, the sheriff's wife, who was coming up to mop the hall. From inside the cell, Baxley yelled at her to run back down again. Messamore then dashed into the toilet adjacent to his cell. Clee fired a shot at him as he dashed back past the cell, but it went wide. Inside the toilet, Messamore smashed the window, pushed out the screen, and dropped, cat-like, to the sidewalk between the jail and an adjoining building 20 feet below. I believe that is a 6. He then ran out onto the street and hailed a ride from V. Hayden, who was unaware of the jailbreak. Hayden said he was only going to the Keller Manufacturing Company, 2.5 blocks from the jail, but Messamore piled in his truck anyway. At the manufacturing company grounds, Messamore jumped out, crossed a creek, and disappeared up a hill.
The search for Messamore was the largest in Indiana history at the time. Here's a little bit more. Garrett, read a little bit more from that article.
As squads of state police and G-men blocked all roads in the area and scoured the wooded, rolling countryside, Messamore was reported sighted at least twice in the area, once by a farm wife and again by a truck driver. At 8 p.m., a man carrying a spade walked up on the front porch at the farmhouse of Leo Taylor, 4 miles west of here on a backcountry road. He inquired directions to Rockport from the frightened Mrs. Taylor. Told how to get there, he walked back on the road, then turned east the opposite direction from Rockport. Mrs. Taylor, who had heard reports of the jailbreak over the radio, called her husband in from the barn and told him she had just talked to the fugitive. Taylor jumped into the family car and drove toward Corydon. Without finding a trace of the hunted man, he notified authorities who converged on the area, combing the countryside as they came. They searched the nearby White Top schoolhouse and other buildings in the neighborhood without success. Mrs. Taylor positively identified her visitor as Messamore from photographs shown her by police. Her description tallied with one given police by a truck driver halted at a police roadblock on Indiana 62, a short distance west of the Taylor farm. The driver said he had picked up a nervous man with a spade about 2 miles west of Corydon. He said the man suddenly jumped out of the truck about 3 miles before reaching the blockade. From these reports, police believed they had Messamore hemmed in an area roughly 5 miles square, with Corydon at the center. He apparently was wandering aimlessly in one direction, then another. Messamore was reported dressed in a pair of overalls and a cap stolen from a farmhouse soon after the jailbreak. He was believed to have suffered cuts about the head and right hand in his leap to freedom. Squads of state police from the Seymour, Charlestown, and Jasper posts were thrown into the manhunt, along with FBI agents from Indianapolis and sheriffs and police from surrounding cities and counties. All radio stations in the area were alerted, and roads in all directions were barricaded.
Messmore found his way to the Ohio River near Leavenworth, Indiana. And under cover of darkness, he made his way onto the beach. There was a small boat. It's referred to as a skiff, just sitting on the beach. Just then, he heard people coming through the woods, so he ducked down under the boat. The officers found footprints on the beach and saw that the skiff was still sitting there on the beach. They assumed that Messmore had gone into the river, so they started searching downriver for him. Now, this is Indiana in the middle of March. As you can imagine, the water would have been very cold. When they didn't find any further signs of him, they returned back to the beach. The skiff was no longer there. Officials assumed that since he didn't have a paddle, or at least they had not seen one, they assumed that he had gone downriver with the current. But Messmore had another trick up his sleeve, or more in his suitcase. Remember, he had grabbed that spade out of his suitcase. And, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to end it right here for this episode. I do hope you're enjoying our story. You know, sometimes it's hard for me to grasp that this is a true story. I haven't made any of this up. That's why I have Garrett here reading actual news stories to back up what I'm telling you.
Thank you, Roger.
If you have a theory about what happened on Saltwell Hill, please share it with us. Send me an email to whathappened@saltwellhill.com. Put theory in the subject line, and maybe I'll read your story in an upcoming podcast. This is Roger Hunter.
And this is Garrett Altmeyer.
Please like, follow, review, and comment if you're enjoying our story, but most of all, share us with your friends. Stick around for a prelude to episode 6, and I do hope you'll join us in episode 6 when we look further into what happened on Saltwell Hill. Are you prepared for life's unexpected twists and turns? At Rapid Answers Life Insurance, we understand that life is full of uncertainties. That's why we're here to offer you peace of mind and financial security with our comprehensive life insurance plans. With Rapid Answers, you can secure instant coverage and get peace of mind in minutes. Our streamlined online process ensures you're covered without the hassles of lengthy paperwork and waiting periods. Say goodbye to doctor visits and needles because our policies require no medical exams, making it easier than ever to get covered. Don't wait for tomorrow to secure your family's future. Act now, because life is precious and your loved ones deserve the best protection. Rapid Answers Life Insurance, where your questions are answered and your future is secure. Go to www.rapidanswers.life. That's www.rapidanswers.life. Hey, Roger sneaking back in here. I'm not going to give you a whole lot for episode 6. I have to tell you this. We're not done with the escapes yet. It's one of the things that baffles me in this whole story. I'm going to give you that. We've still got more escapes to come, and we'll see you in episode 6.